Hello, welcome to the National Road Heritage Corridor's Heritage Stewards Academy. I'm Jen Burden, Director of Cultural Resources for the National Road. In this episode, Melinda Meyer, public historian, board member of Preservation Erie, and champion of old stuff, provides advice on how to best store and organize that old stuff that various organizations keep for their own use and/or public use.
Hello, I'm Melinda Meyer, and I am a public historian and champion of old stuff. The presentation today is proper methods and techniques for preserving and storing organizational materials, and it is a presentation that is taken from years of experience working with collecting institutions and special projects that involve collection management. So today we're going to cover organizing collections, assessing collections, cataloging, digitizing. So there are a lot of different topics that we're going to cover with today's presentation. There are a lot of different types of entities in our communities that collect historical records. These include museums and historical societies and historic sites. Those are oftentimes the organizations that we think about when we think about collections and historical records, but there are many other types of organizations in our community that maintain historic records. This includes county and municipal governments, churches, clubs and organizations like the YMCA down the street, or your local community theater, or your nonprofits that serve the community in other ways, and schools. So all of these different types of entities have historical records that represent our community in many different ways, and it's important that they exist. So each of these different types of local repositories, they play a really key role in preserving our local history. So when we think about collecting institutions at the state level or even the national level, our local community may or may not be represented in the collections of the state archives or the national archives, but we can guarantee that our local community's history is well represented in the organizations and local governments that serve our community. So these records are incredibly important for researchers, for genealogists, for the general public, because pieced together, they tell our community stories regarding our businesses, our family histories, the organizations, the places that make each of our communities what they are. So the conditions of these historical records, they vary from organization to organization. So I've got some photographs here of historical records that I've come across over my experience working with collections. And so some collections are very well organized. They have been boxed in archival quality boxes. There is a hierarchy to the structure or the organization of the collection, and there may even be finding aids in place where researchers or members of the public can come and easily access the content of the records. But in other cases, not so much. I've also seen in different organizations where they've got a back closet or a back room where just boxes of old stuff has been piled, and no one really has touched it in ages because no one knows what it is and whether or not it's important or relevant for the organization. So regardless of the condition, these records can be organized, they can be made accessible to the public, they can be made accessible and usable by the organization that holds them. It just takes a little bit of time. So the first kind of large overarching subject that we'll look at is preserving these historical records. So to preserve something means to implement or take action designed to prolong the life of these historical records and to minimize any deterioration or change in their conditions. And one of the ways in which we do this is by maintaining certain environmental conditions where we store these archival or historical records. So one of the important things to do is to control the climate as best we can of the room or of the building in which these records are kept. So for documents and photographs and similar paper materials that are historical, it's best to maintain a temperature between 60 and 70 degrees with a relative humidity of between 30% and 50%. If possible, avoid fluctuations in the climate because extreme fluctuations can actually do damage to the collections. In addition to controlling the climate of the space, you can also develop policies and or security measures, implement security measures to present or to manage access to the historical records. When we're thinking about access to historical records, you may not want every employee or volunteer of your organization to have access to these materials, just because you want to make sure that whomever is handling them understands their value and will not do any damage nor discard any of the materials without proper assessment. So properly securing records is really quite important as well. And there are different ways in which you can manage access to collection storage rooms. One easy way to do this is simply to have a locked door and limit the number of people who have access to the key. That's just a very basic way to manage access to historical record storage. Wherever these items are being stored, it's also important to regularly clean or vacuum the area. We want to eliminate or remove dust and debris that may build up in the storage site. Think about, when you're in a historical records room, if the storage space is filthy, it is very easy to then transfer dirt and debris when you're working in the boxes and the shelves onto the records themselves. So make sure to keep your storage spaces clean. Don't bring food or water into your storage spaces. I think this is probably common sense, right? Not only can food and water damage historical records, it's also key in pest prevention. Historical records, they can be used as mice nesting material. I have seen in many cases mice or other rodents getting into boxes of materials, shredding it, and then using it for nesting materials, but also insects, right? So making sure that no food or water is in your record space will kind of help with the prevention of pests, and to make sure that you don't periodically entertain visits from pests. It's a good idea to just check for that activity. Just as you would at your own home, in places where you think you may have mice, you can check for droppings, you can check for insects that have died, right? So when you find dead insects or mouse droppings, you know you've got a problem with pests. Minimizing light. So many of the windows that we buy today automatically come with UV filters, or some type of UV protectant layer, but also physical light can cause damage to collections. Because we want to minimize the exposure of our records to both UV and physical light, it's a good idea to keep collections in a space where there are no windows, or if there are windows, make sure that they have light blocking shades. Make sure that you're using appropriate lighting for the space. So again, those are just a few of the things that you can do to create an environment in which your historical records will be preserved. It's also key to utilize proper storage and handling techniques. With historic records, I have seen records stored in plastic tubs, in boxes, produce boxes secured from a local grocery store, right? Collections can come in to your organization, or people can choose to box collections in different ways, some of which are potentially damaging to the collections. So there are a number of companies that actually make archival quality materials, such as record center boxes, file folders, object or photograph boxes, and textile boxes. Gaylord Archival, Hollinger Metal Edge, and University Products are just 3 examples of companies that produce materials and supplies that are specifically designed for long-term historic record collection and storage. I should mention as well that sometimes these materials can be costly. One of the reasons why people choose to just go out and buy Rubbermaid tubs or pick up boxes from the local grocery store is that those materials are inexpensive. So purchasing archive quality storage supplies can come with a price tag, or does come with a price tag. And so if you have a large set of records that you're maintaining, what you can do is prioritize which of those records is most critical in reboxing into archival quality material, which ones are most fragile, which ones are most critical and unique. And so once you've made those decisions, you can kind of phase and budget out the purchase of supplies over years if necessary. Because as I said, archival supplies can be costly, but it's not insurmountable, right? You can develop a budget for these materials and or seek grant funding to support the purchase of these materials. So some general storage do's and don'ts. Many buildings can be susceptible to flooding, whether it be a sprinkler system in place, or perhaps an archival storage room is next to or near plumbing fixtures, or perhaps the building itself is in a floodplain, right? Flooding is a possibility for many buildings and storage locations, and so it's critical to keep your documents or your records at least 6 inches off the floor. Don't use wood shelving. If at all possible, use metal shelving. Do handle items by their edges and avoid folding or bending items unnecessarily. So you don't want to store materials folded. So if you can, if you have materials that have come in, whether they be larger than 8.5 by 11, and they've been folded up to smaller sizes, unfold those items and store them flat. Store them flat in flat boxes or store them flat in file folders that have support within Record Center boxes. And do remove staples, paper clips, and other fasteners that can damage materials. I'm sure many of you have opened up historic records and you've seen paper clips which have been in place for decades, and over time the paper clip has rusted and left a paper clip mark on the historical document, or rubber bands that over time adhere to the documents that they are containing. And so over time the rubber band may deteriorate, it may adhere to the historical records. These are all different types of fasteners that really should be removed from historical records for long-term preservation. Let's move on to organizing, arranging materials based on provenance and original order. So it's really important to understand the records and items that you hold in your collection, especially if you're starting from scratch. If you are approaching a closet that has been used by your church or local government or another agency to simply store historical stuff for decades, and no one really knows what's inside this closet, right? So when you're starting from scratch, it's important to maintain the existing container and folder structure, as well as the original organization of the materials within those containers, but carefully review and create a high-level inventory of what you have. Once you determine what you have, it will be easier to determine the type and number of archival supplies that need to be purchased, as well as shelving units that may need to be purchased, and ultimately the type of storage space that is needed for the historical records. It's also important in determining really what kinds of materials do you have. Are the historical materials that you have primarily paper? Are they documents, books, maps, letters, manuscripts, journals? Or are they objects like sculptures or lanterns or some type of physical item or object? Or do you have a combination of both? Depending on the type of collection you have, it will impact, again, which supplies you purchase for ultimately reboxing and storage. So once you have an inventory prepared, you can begin to identify or create some type of an organizational structure for the records. And there are lots of ways in which records can be organized. If anyone tells you there's only one way to organize records, I would say that that's not true. You'll find as you begin to organize your records that there are many different ways to create an organizational structure or to utilize an existing organizational structure that will make sense for both you, kind of the keeper of these historical records, as well as the public and researchers. So if materials are related to a single individual or family or perhaps an organization, it's possible to group them or organize them together based on that affiliation. It's pretty important to maintain the original arrangement of these historical records because typically there is a purpose or a reason that the creator organized historical records in a certain way. And so if you can identify an organization established by the creator, that allows you to identify also the context for those historical records. However, if you're working in a room or a closet where it is just a catch-all and again looks more like a junk pile of historical materials that has been thrown into a room, you may need to create an organizational structure for your records. So one of the ways in which to do this is to create a hierarchy of materials. And so at the top of this hierarchy might be series names, and you can organize records into broad categories or series, such as correspondence, photographs, financial records. And as you build out this series, most likely there will be sub-series underneath that. Let me provide an example. So the example that we'll provide is related to the Dodge family collection. The Dodge family collection is owned by the Harbor Creek Historical Society. It is a 40-box collection that includes historical records going back to the 1790s through the 1970s. It is a single family-oriented collection, so that everything in this 40-box collection pertains directly to the Dodge family. In sorting, or in, I should say, inventorying that collection, a hierarchy was identified. And so in the slide that you see before you, we have series 1 through 10. And so these are the top level categories that were established for the materials in the Dodge family collection. So we have genealogy paperwork. We actually have Dodge family journals. These are journals or diaries that were written by members of the Dodge family. Correspondence. The collection contains 5 or more boxes of letters that were received by Dodge family members over multiple decades. Legal and real estate related documents, so deeds that pertain to property ownership or transactions, as well as legal documents related to the farm they managed. We have financial materials that belonged to the family itself as they were managing the Dodge family farm. We have the Dodge Brothers business, which was a separate business altogether owned by the Dodge family, and the records that were preserved that relate directly to this business. We have photographs of the family. There are a small number of objects that have been collected. There is at least one paperweight, as well as kind of a marketing or promotional material, promotional item that was used to promote the Dodge Brothers business. And it is actually in the objects section or objects series. The Dodge family was very active in the Harbor Creek Presbyterian Church, and so that is its own series, and there's a local interest section. So the Dodge family also were very involved in a lot of different organizations in the community, and they collected materials from plays, political rallies, a lot of different types of things that they attended within the community. So those items are included in Series 10 of local interest. So within each of these series, there are sub-series. So to break this down even further, if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, we see Series 6, which is the Dodge Brothers business. It has been divided into 5 sub-series. So everything within the sub-series relates back to the Dodge Brothers business. So we have bills and invoices, account statements, ledgers, receipts, and correspondence. We break this down even further into individual folders. So within the subseries correspondence, and again, this is under Series 6 of the Dodge Brothers business, we have folders for several individual years. So 1872, the folder labeled 1872 contains correspondence related to the Dodge Brothers business. The second folder is 1873, and so on and so forth. And so this is the hierarchy that has been created for the Dodge family collection. If you are working with a municipal collection, there may already be, again, an organizational structure in existence, just because of the administrative nature of the local government. But if not, and if we were to apply this method of organization to a municipal collection, we might start with a series titled Departments, a series titled Photographs, a series titled Financial Records or Financial Administration, right? And then within, let's say, the department series, there may be sub-series zoning, parks, water, sewer. So there are many different ways to apply the strategy provided here, which is, again, creating an organizational structure for your records, really with the intent to improve access and their usability. Cataloging. This is a process of describing and organizing materials, which again helps to make them accessible for both research and other users. So a key part in cataloging, or key activity in cataloging, is making sure that materials are appropriately described. And this is a broad term describing materials, but it includes a lot of different specifics, right? So when we're describing materials, we're talking about describing the original source of the materials. Did the materials come from the organization itself, or did the materials come from a donor in the community? What is the context for these materials? What years were these materials created and by whom? Is there a use or function for these materials? And then the physical characteristics of these materials. So by cataloging a collection, you're capturing metadata, and metadata is just data about data. And this can seem overwhelming, but I promise you, once you get a handle on what metadata is, you will be able to begin to collect or record information about your historical records in a way that, again, will improve access and usability. So again, metadata is information about the historical records themselves. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see a list of metadata categories that have been prioritized or standardized by the Society of American Archivists through describing archives a content standard. So when working with historical records, these are the different types of data that will be collected through the cataloging process. So in many cases, you will give your historical records, whether it's a single collection or a series of collections. They will each have their own identifier. There will be a title for the collection. So in the example used previously, with the Harbor Creek Historical Society, the title of the collection was the Dodge Family Collection. A date range for the collection, again, utilizing the Dodge Family Collection as an example, that collection had materials from 1797 through 1977. The extent or size of the collection, the Dodge Family Collection, was a 40 box or is a 40 box collection. The name of the creator, there are multiple creators for the Dodge Family Collection, starting with John Dodge and moving up through the most recent Dodge family members who gifted the collection to the Harbor Creek Historical Society. They actually created some of the genealogical records that are within the collection. There's the scope and content, which basically describes the type of materials and their subjects broadly, the conditions that are governing access. So are these public records? Are these records that need to be maintained as private? The language of the materials in the Dodge Family Collection, the majority of the materials are in English, but we do have some documents that are in French. The source of the acquisition, so if this is a collection that was donated, and in the case of the Dodge Family Collection, it was donated to the Harbor Creek Historical Society. The source of the acquisition is the donor, the individual who gifted the collection to the society. Biographical and historical information, so a little bit of information about the Dodge family. Subjects and keyword searches, or 4 keyword searches within the Dodge Family Collection. There is information related to the Civil War. The Dodge family journals, there were several family members who were keeping journals and or diaries during the Civil War years. So there are Civil War related materials. There are letters, correspondence that pertain directly to the 1918 flu epidemic. So there are a lot of different types of subjects included in the Dodge Family Collection, and identifying those subjects again helps researchers in accessing those collections. The location. Do you have a single storage room for all of your historical records and or collections, or are you using multiple rooms and or multiple shelving within those rooms? So defining the location, how can people or employees or volunteers physically access these collections? Where will they find them? Any related materials? So with the Dodge Family Collection, we actually have at the Harbor Creek Historical Society a smaller Dodge Family Collection that was gifted years prior to the 40 box collection, and the decision was made to maintain that as a separate collection, but it is related to the larger Dodge Family Collection. And of course the cataloger, who is the volunteer or the staff member who is developing not just the organizational structure for the collection, but also capturing the metadata for the records. There are lots of different ways in which collections can be cataloged. There are several tools and software options that are available for institutions who are wanting to properly document their collections. When deciding on which tools or software to use, it's important to consider these 4 things. So functionality. So why are you engaging in a cataloging process? Ultimately, do you want simply to preserve these materials? So are you looking for a solution, a cataloging solution that allows for the long-term preservation of these collection materials? Are you ultimately looking to publish materials online? So how or what do you need this software to accomplish? Cost is often another factor. There are several open source platforms or software that are free to use, but there are also commercial softwares available that come with annual subscription fees and or a fee based on the number of items to be cataloged. So if your organization is incredibly small, like the Harbor Creek Historical Society, the society's annual budget is typically around $5,000 to $7,000. That's an annual operating budget, so it is indeed a small organization. An $800 or $500 a year subscription fee to a commercial cataloging software may not be feasible. And so it may be critical to look solely at the open source options. So definitely take a look at your budget and what you might be able to afford on an annual basis, because you're not looking for a cataloging platform for a single year, right? This is a software that will be useful for years to come. Scalability. Consider whether or not the software or solution that or cataloging solution that you're looking at can actually manage the size of records that you need it to. So when you begin to investigate different software options, you'll see that some software platforms or online platforms are designed specifically for collections that have 50,000 or less items in them. Others are designed for institutions that have more than 50,000 items in their collection. So just be sure to take a look at the capabilities of the software in terms of storage and number of items it can manage. And integration. Does the software play well with the other software that the institution uses? So these are 4 things to consider when you're trying to find a solution for cataloging. And here are just a small number of collection management or cataloging software that is currently available. So if all else fails, you can always use Microsoft Word or Excel to maintain records on your collections, that metadata that we talked about. But there are also commercially available software. So Past Perfect is a commercial software package specifically designed for museum and collection management. For many years, Past Perfect was the standard for collection management software. Catalogit is also a commercial software. It is a cloud-based collections management software. And what's interesting about Catalogit is not only can you use it on a laptop or desktop, it also comes with an app for your phone. Archive Space is open source, and so it is primarily designed for archives management. And Preservica. Preservica is, it does have cataloging capabilities, but it is designed really as a preservation platform to preserve your digital files. What Preservica promises is to upgrade your digital files over time as technology changes, so that Preservica's commitment to you is that it will continue to upgrade your digital files as digital or as technology changes and new file formats become available. So since we're talking about digitizing, is creating digital copies of materials. Most often this is with the intent to preserve the original records. When you digitize records, it improves their accessibility as well, so that the historical record you can file, you can maintain it in the archival quality boxes in a climate or environmentally controlled storage room, and simply work with a digital version of those historical records. So when approaching digitization, and this can be incredibly intimidating or overwhelming just in some cases because of the size of the collection or collections that are maintained by your organization. But I promise you, it's not something that needs to be done in 10 minutes. Digitization is a long-term preservation project. And so depending on the size of your collection, it may take years to digitize the portions of your collection that are critical for digitization. So the very first place to start is to determine the scope of your digitization project. So why are you choosing to digitize? Again, in most cases, you're choosing to make a digital copy of something that is fragile and should be handled minimally. It is also common for digitization projects to have the goal of improving access to the collections, because there are many ways in which organizations can publish digital collections online. So also consider what materials do you want to digitize. If we're looking at a collection like the Dodge family collection, again, a 40-box collection, it is not feasible to digitize every single piece of paper in that collection. So when that collection was processed and organized, the volunteers who were working on organizing the collection identified materials that would be most useful for researchers, as well as genealogists in the community. And so in organizing that collection, a list of priority materials was created. And so the Historical Society has actually started digitizing the collection, beginning with the correspondence, photographs, genealogy records that were identified as priority materials. And know who your audience is. Again, in the example that I just referenced, the audience for the Harbor Creek Historical Society, with the items that have been prioritized for digitization, we know that researchers may find useful the Civil War related materials, again, the 1918 flu epidemic. There are letters relating to the Prohibition era. One of the Dodge family members was married to a Prohibition agent who did raids on speakeasies in the Pittsburgh area. And so there are letters in the collection that are from him to his wife, who was a Dodge family member. And he talks about his work as a Prohibition agent conducting these raids. So those topics are very broad topics. They have not just local appeal, but also state and national appeal as well. So we know that researchers will find those interesting. We also know that genealogy is incredibly important and popular, and so that's why the photographs and the genealogy documents were prioritized for digitization. So who's going to be using ultimately these digitized files and why? In selecting materials for digitization, consider the uniqueness and importance of the historical record. So again, looking at what was prioritized in the Dodge family collection, the first-hand accounts of the Civil War, living in Harbor Creek during the Civil War, attending political rallies during the Civil War, having children from neighboring farm families enlisted and sent off to war. Those are unique letters. They are unique materials. The letters or correspondence that also relate to the 1918 flu and the Prohibition era are, again, really unique, potentially useful primary documents for researchers. Understand copyright. It is incredibly important to know which materials you have permission or authorization to publish, well, not just publish, but to digitize and then potentially make available to the public through an online publishing tool. And permissions. If you are aware of materials in your collection where someone else holds the copyright, before you can digitize those and again make them accessible to researchers, you'll want to pursue permission to do so. So digitizing specifics, there are a lot of different resources online to help organizations through the digitization process. These are just some of the things that you'll want to consider when you approach a digitization project. So what quality are you going to be scanning photographs, documents, and in which file formats? So for graphic material, so photographs and similar materials that that contain graphics, TIFF is the recommended format, and for correspondence, maps, PDF is a good alternative to the TIFF. So PDF is an accepted file format. Again, let's talk about data about the data, so metadata. Think through how you're going to describe your digital items. With regards to metadata, there is only so much information that you can include in a file name. So in beginning a digitization process, it really is important to establish a file naming format, as well as documenting when the item was digitized, who digitized the resource. Collecting that data is just as important as all of the other information we've discussed with regards to metadata. Equipment. Again, here at the Harbor Creek Historical Society, we had secured grant funding to purchase both a scanner as well as a laptop. And so we actually reached out to different collecting institutions and local repositories to ask what types of equipment they use for scanning collections. And so based on the information that we collected, that's how we chose our scanner. So in thinking through your equipment choices, you'll want to determine what you're scanning, the size of the item that you're scanning, whether or not the scanner comes with its own software or you need to purchase an additional software to manipulate or work with the scanned images. We bought a scanner that was large enough to be able to accommodate archival materials as large as 11 by 17. So the glass plate, the scanning plate for the scanner is at least large enough to manage an 11 by 17 document. Books are can be fragile. So older books, their spines can be fragile or delicate. So if you have an extensive collection of ledgers, journals, historical documents that are fragile, or historical books, I should say, that are fragile, you may want to consider an overhead scanner. Right? So think through what you have to scan, its size, and what will allow, again, the best, safest handling of these materials during the digitization process. And then, of course, storage and backup. As you digitize your collection, you'll find that the digitized files begin to take up more and more space on your laptop or computer or cloud storage platform, whatever you are using. And so you'll want to make sure that at all times you have enough storage to properly maintain your digitized records. And backup. It's recommended that you have at least 2 separate backup storage strategies planned. Once you begin the digitization process, you may choose at some point to publish your digitized materials online, and there are lots of different ways you can do this. So several of the software options that we discussed earlier in the presentation also allow for the publishing of either entire collections or select collections online. So the example provided here is the Mercyhurst collection. The Mercyhurst University Archives has published portions of their archives using Preservica. Catalog It and Past Perfect also allow the publishing of again, select or entire collections online. This improves access to your collections greatly. But if you publish your digitized collections through any of these platforms, just be prepared to receive questions and requests from researchers. So this has been just a quick presentation, a quick overview of managing and handling historical records. There are a lot of different resources available to you to kind of dig down into each of these different areas that we talked about. So here are 4 different websites and or online resources that you can access that will provide you with more information about organization, digitization, cataloging. And so I would encourage you to spend some time on each of these sites. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. This has been a wonderful opportunity to share information about collection management.
Thank you, Melinda. Really appreciate the presentation and answering a lot of issues that I know many historical societies, museums, and even other organizations are facing. I have a couple just quick questions. I think these are pretty easy. Actually, the first one's super easy. It's not even a question. As somebody who's purchased a lot of materials from Gaylord Archival, I highly recommend doing a search for a discount code. They always seem to have one, and I just looked, and they have, it's either 20 or 25% off coupon that goes through the end of 2025. It's amazing what an additional 20% can do. So if you have a budget of $500 to buy archival boxes, folders, whatever. Fill your cart with that 500, apply the code, and just see how much more you can add on to it. Of course, there's shipping and tax, but another few boxes or boxes of folders can go a long way. So my first question to you specifically is, what are your thoughts on using or not using gloves to handle collections?
In most cases, I think that collections can be handled without gloves. What I've found is that gloves can sometimes snag on documents or paper and cause additional tears. And so I'm very cautious when I'm working with fragile documents, specifically not to use gloves. But I will wash and dry my hands prior to working with those documents, because I want to approach those materials with clean, dry hands. So I've removed as much of the oil as possible, right, through the hand washing process, so that I can really handle with care those items, again, without gloves. Photographs are another story. I actually prefer using gloves when I am working with photographs, because I think we've all seen photographs where you've got the thumbprint right in the middle of the photograph. And so to avoid those unnecessary fingerprints on the photographs themselves, I do actually use gloves when I'm working extensively with photographs.
Thanks. And just a quick question on monitoring and adjusting humidity in rooms. I know a lot of collections are sometimes stored in basements, which they're there to get out of the way of, especially a historic house museum, so there's room, but basements are their own issue when it comes to humidity. So can you recommend like a device to monitor the humidity, and then in something like a basement where the humidity is going to be high, do you recommend a dehumidifier or something else to keep it within the useful range?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because I meant to actually talk about all of that during the presentation. So in monitoring a room or building's climate, you can actually go just to Walmart and purchase a temperature and humidity sensor for under $10. So these are little tiny devices that fit in the palm of your hand. Some of them are magnetic, so you can actually attach them to the metal shelving that is holding the historical records. Others will have kind of a built-in little platform so that it can sit on top of a desk or counter space. But again, these sensors are relatively inexpensive. You can purchase them from anywhere from $8 to $10. Again, just at Walmart or even a hardware store. So once you have the sensors purchased, and you may find if your historic records are in a single storage room, you may only need one sensor. But if you are storing historic records in, let's say, an entire basement, you may want to include or place two sensors in the basement, one on each end of the basement, and then monitor. So before you take action and try to correct something, right, you need to determine what the problem is. So I would say once you have the sensors in place, begin to monitor those sensors over multiple seasons so that you can see changes in temperature and humidity, again, over multiple months, multiple seasons, and then you can plan a strategy. So if you find that the basement has a high relative humidity, you may need to purchase a dehumidifier or multiple dehumidifiers to maintain, right, the relative humidity across the entire basement. You may also find that there are rooms where I have seen storage rooms that do not include HVAC vents. They're kind of corner storage rooms, right? And so even though the rest of the building is well maintained by the HVAC system, this one room, which happens to be where the historical records are kept, the temperature of the room fluctuates with the season, so that in summer it's incredibly hot regardless of what the AC is at, and in winter it's incredibly cold. So in that case, again, it might just be, if you can maintain security, it might just be making sure that the door to that room is kept open, knowing that it doesn't have, it's not served by the HVAC unit. Or you could also look at improved insulation to the room. I mean, right, there are other strategies that you can look at, but I think purchasing the sensors, getting them in place, and then monitoring them over a period of time, and again over multiple seasons, I think will give you a good idea of how your storage space, how the climate of your storage space changes throughout the year.
Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you for giving this presentation. I know that caring for these collections is super important, but can also be super overwhelming, but it's important work. And I think you've mentioned in your presentation, it's not something that you need to do all at once. You know, it's definitely a piecemeal based on who you have available, resources you have. But anything to improve the collections and to categorize them and then finally digitizing them, any steps will be well worth it. And it's something that you can build over time. So thank you for demystifying some of these things and providing a number of suggestions to help those organizations do what they need to do. And onwards and upwards.
Thank you.